So I was thinking about what is this pandemic left with us? If you have to look back and ask, is there anything for us to learn from this pandemic? And then, of course, how is it going to make sense for us to look at Gita, given the kind of learnings that we have? So I want to make three very important points and shape my discussions and my sharing my thoughts only around these three. I mean, Gita is so vast, one can keep going on and on, but I'll stick to these three. The first thing pandemic has taught to all of us by sheer experience is that nobody can guess outcomes. Nobody can guess what is going to be the outcomes of one's life and one's efforts. The only thing that you can do is put your best foot forward. In fact, has come in such a clarity to us in the last 10 months. Nobody knew that such a pandemic is going to unfold, and nobody knew how we are going to. I mean, nobody imagined we'll have a conference in which none of us will even meet each other face to face, but use an electronic platform. What more do you need to know? And it has hit people. I mean, many of us are fortunate. But I think if you look at the migrant labor issues and so on, businesses have been hit, people have lost their jobs. All these, how many of us guessed? We were only spending a lot of time talking about Vision 2020. Nobody knew 2020 would be like this. As a professor of management in IIM Bangalore for 30 years, I have spent a lot of time on Vision 2020 workshops. I'm just smiling at it now. That's the first lesson. Nobody could guess outcomes. This is the first learning, but what India has taught to the rest of the world is whatever be the outcomes, we can train ourselves to put the best foot forward. This is what Indian society has done. Otherwise, we would have, for the kind of number of cases and the kind of health infrastructure, we could have collapsed long back. I think that's not what India is. These are all because of Gita. I'll come to it a little later to that point. That's the first lesson that we need to think through. The second lesson that I keep wondering is nobody could find out, nobody could even today, we are writing papers, all that we are doing for our profession. Udara nimittam bahukrita veshaha we are doing. But nobody could honestly, let me tell you, find out how could this economy have such a great downfall. I mean, there is so much of erosion of economic value. GDPs are now talked about in minus, not in plus. And the job shrinkage, the shrinkage of GDP, real value, everything. So therefore, nobody knew what really drives these. What are the factors which drive these kinds of events that unfold? I want you to think through it, because these are the real learnings of pandemic. This is where we need to connect ourselves with Gita. So this is the big thing. Our life assumptions have changed, and nobody knew how this is being caused. I mean, we are only looking at the past and then writing historically what we found in the last 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and so on. But we were not able to make sense of what is happening. So this is the second important message I want to harp upon. And the third thing which we have also learned through this pandemic is that every one of us know that life is a roller coaster. The previous speakers also alluded to that. Life is, we have learned it by experience. It's a roller coaster. So there is a world of duality in front of us. In fact, I jokingly tell in my Bhagavada-Gita courses and in my classes and so on, I used to tell very jokingly that buy one, take one free is something which Sri Krishna has talked about in Gita. I'll come to it a little later, that if you want success, you also have to take failure, which is given free for you. This is what I called as the world of duality. This world is full of duality, success, failure. You get positive, negative, I like, I don't like. There are so many things. And we have learned all that in the last 9 months. So now, given these three major learnings, which there are many more, for want of time, I have just taken only a few of them. Given these three major learnings, then the question now is, where is Gita coming now? what is it that Gita says, and as a leader, so now we'll go to the second part of the story, which is the leadership. So what are leaders supposed to do? Should leaders learn a little bit from this? Do you need a different crop of leaders who could understand these realities of life and say, let me see how I adjust? Now, very quickly, when I was a student of management 35 years back, we were taught theory X and theory Y. That's all was leadership. We were told there is something called a theory X leadership and there is a theory Y leadership. Many universities continue to teach it today also. But let me tell you, between that and now, there are about 35 different theories of leadership which has emerged now. Somebody made a mention of servant leadership, spiritual leadership, contingency leadership. So many things are there. Level 5 leadership. So we have covered a lot of ground. But just to tell you, leadership has moved from, at least in research and a little bit of a practice, not widely, little bit of a practice, leadership has moved from saying, looking at leadership as a entitlement, as a power and position, and one can, have so much of, control, so much have, one has so much of entitlement and resources at their disposal. All those are old ideas, let me tell you. If people are still practicing that kind of leadership, they would be better off by looking at least one shloka from Bhagavad-Gita in chapter 3, where Krishna says that Devan bhavayata anena te deva bhavayantuvaha parasparam bhavayantaha shreyaha param avapsyata. This paraspara bhava is the height of leadership. Mutual dependence is very important. From independence to dependence to interdependence is where we are moving actually. So therefore, I think we need to be aware that, leadership, I think somebody needs to mute. I see some noise coming. Can you please request people to mute? Okay. Yeah. So, thank you. Yeah, so therefore, I think leadership has to change. Leadership has to understand that they have to pick up a few ideas. Now, again, I will take, based on these three major experiences that we have through the pandemic, let me just indicate a few ideas that Gita gives to us in terms of what we can do to be a better leader, given these kinds of lessons that we have got from pandemic. Now, the first and the most important uh, mm, issue that a leader must know in order to be successful, because it is COVID-19 today, but what we need to understand is these three underlying patterns of events which are out of our hands. So leaders must be ready to handle that and equip themselves. So this is where Gita comes. So what does Gita say about this? Now, if you carefully read Gita, and I do not know how many of you have noticed, there is one issue which Sri Krishna has spoken about 35 to 40 times throughout Gita. And for some of those who have read Gita very well, you might know, the real teachings of Gita starts from the 11th shloka in chapter 2. 2.11, that is where the Gita teachings actually start. It says, Ashocyan anvashochastum prajnavadam shabashase. Gatasun agatasum chanam sochanti pandita. That's where Gita teachings actually start, which is the 11th shloka in chapter 2. Exactly 3 shlokas from there, in the 14th shloka of Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna introduces a very important concept which he carries up to the end of Gita. At about 40 places, this idea has been repeated, and which is very important for the leaders today. And what is that? It says, Matra sparsast kaunteya, Sitoshna sukha dukkataha, Agamapayino anityaha, Tam titikshasva bharata. He introduces a concept called titiksha. He says the world will blow hot and cold. He says, Sitoshna sukha dukkataha, Sukha and dukkha, Sita and Ushna, blow hot and cold, happiness and sadness and so on. He says, Agamapayinaha anityaha. They are all in the habit of coming and going. And one should be in a position to endure them. And that Sense of endurance is a very important capability for a leader. So that is called Titiksha Bhava. Now this Titiksha Bhava, which he introduced in the 14th shloka, first time, he followed up with a shloka immediately after that, in which he said, Sama Dukkha Sukham Dhiram Saha Amritatvaya Kalpate. He says a person who is able to handle these dualities of life, Sukha and Dukkha, with a certain sense of Samatva, he says, I will raise him to the level of immortality. Amritatvaya kalpate. In the same chapter 2, there are so many shlokas. I'm not going to get into all of them. The first speaker actually talked about samatvam, siddha asiddhayoho samo bhutva, samatvam yoga uchyate. He quoted that shloka. He also quoted the shloka, samadukke, sukadukke same kritva, labha labho jaya jayo. Tato yuddhaya yujyasva, naivam papam avapsis. It's a great management concept lies here. It says, sukha dukkhe same kritva. When you get sukha and dukkha, treat it equally. Learn, develop that habit of treating them equally. Then labha labho jaya jayo. So there are three pairs of dualities Krishna has said there. One is sukha and dukkha, another is labha and alabha, and another is called jaya and ajaya. There is a great management concept here. You engage in an activity. That is what in the second line he says, tato yuddhaya ujjasva. The activity that Arjuna is going to engage is called war. Then now Krishna says, an activity will give an outcome for you, jaya or ajaya. It is again a world of duality, jaya and ajaya. Now, outcomes per se doesn't make any sense. You have to put it into a performance metric. Only then you know. For example, that's why he says labha and alabha. You know what happens in a medical parlance, if I have to say. Sometimes the operation is successful, but the patient dies. It happens quite often in surgery, in zombies, and so on. And ajaya, it is labha and alabha. And out of that comes sukha and dukkha. So what is Krishna saying here? Activity leads to outcomes, which will be in a duality. Outcomes are to be put onto a performance metric, and that will tell you whether you benefit or don't benefit. And out of that comes sukha and dukkha. And he says a good leader should actually treat all of them samadukke sukhe kritva. Labha, labho, jaya, jaya. So like this, he goes on and on. Chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 13. Everywhere it is there. And I want to go to chapter 14, where this idea is so beautifully sort of brought in a couple of shlokas. And these shlokas go like this. It says, I'm sure many of you know that, in chapter 14, which is a Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, when he talks about somebody who has transcended this realm of gunas, he says, Samadukka Sukha Swastha Samaloshtasma Kanchana Tulya Priya Priyo Dhiraha Tulya Ninda Atma Samstutihi Mana Apamanayos Tulyaha Tulyo Mitrari Pakshayoho Sarvaramba Parityagi Gunatitaha Sauchyate. There are several dualities explained here. Sukha and Dukkha, Loshta, Ashma and Kanchana. Kanchana is gold and Loshta is stone. Ashma is mud ball. So somebody who sees all the three should not even blink his eye. The moment he or she starts blinking the eye and seeing the intrinsic value, then it will, tempt and he'll get into some trouble. Some of the great corruptions happen only because they are not able to have a sama loshta ashma kanchana buddhi. Then tulya priya and apriya. Somebody I like, somebody I don't like. A leader should be able to transcend beyond that. It goes on like this. So the first point I would like to make is that to be a great leader, this pandemic has told us, develop titiksha bhava. Otherwise, you are not going to be a leader of any material. The second thing is even more powerful. We did not know that this pandemic will hit us like this, economy will be eroded and so on. But Sri Krishna in chapter 18 of Bhagavad-Gita so beautifully described when you engage in activities. When you engage in activities, the results don't come the way you think. And, we generally understand it, but we do not know what contributes to it. So Sri Krishna has a very nice shloka where he says, Adhishtanam tata karta, karanam cha pratak vidam, vividascha pratak cheshtaha, daivam cha atra pancham. He says there are 5 factors which contribute to work and outcomes. See, in management parlance, we have not been able to understand how work and outcomes are related. We have taken a very simplistic view. We think I will put the best foot forward. If I put the best foot forward, I will have to get results. You thumb the desk and ask for the results. And if results don't come, you get into a mental depression. This is all management has taught us. Because we truly do not understand how work and outcomes are connected. So Krishna says there are 5 factors. Daivam cha atra pancham. The 5th factor is called Daivam. And if you want a modern day description of this Daivam, it is what is called rolling of a dice. It is called, I have to use, or it is called noise. Regression equation, we have what is called noise, an epsilon. It is called probability. All these are nothing but Daivam cha atra pancham. You put the best foot forward, and then let us see what happens. Because all your adhishtanam, the basis to do work, karta, you are the champion of the work, project leader or whatever. Then karanam, you have all gadgets, you have the programs, you have everything that you need, you have all the information. Pritak cheshtaha, all business processes are in place. Krishna says that's not enough. Daivam chatra, I will roll the dice. And develop that sense of humility to take results even when you put the best foot forward. That's why in chapter 2 he said, Karmanyeva adhikaraha ma paleshu kadachana ma karma pala hetudboho ate sangastu akarmani. So here is a very nice set of thoughts which tells us some cardinal principles of what we should do in life when it comes to work, when it comes to results, when it comes to expectations, building, and so on. So if you read all these, at least these 3-4 ideas will come to us. Number 1, how do we engage in work? What to expect in personal life, professional life, and in social life, and so on. There is a situation which demands some action. That's a starting point. Now, I am part of that situation. Step number 2, I am supposed to be responding to the situation. I am a manager, I am the president, I am this, I am that, and so on. I have to do something. I am a project leader, I am a project, one of the project employee, whatever it is. Second, then I will put the best foot forward. That's very, very important. I will put the best foot forward. This is what Krishna is saying. I will fully engage in work and enjoy the work, and I will have the frame of mind and humility to take what comes out of it, because Daivam Chatra Pancham. So I think these are some of the very important lessons that Krishna is given. There are many more. For want of time, I don't want to get into all these. I just wanted to give you a little flair of what one can look for. Only point I would like to make is, I think this pandemic has only upped our antennae. It has given us certain realities of life. But if you ask me how to make sense of the realities of life, I think that's where the Indian wisdom, Bhagavad-Gita is just a sample. The entire Indian wisdom talks about the reality of life and how do we position ourselves to it, what to expect and what not to expect. How do we be part of it? In some sense, I think culturally we are like that. That's why we were able to handle the pandemic much better, despite all the challenges we had. The only problem we have is when you go for work, we keep all these cultural ethos at home and go and then try some Western ideas and get into what is called stress and burnout and so on. It is high time we marry our cultural ethos with our personal and professional life. Then we will restore the glory back. I think with these few words, I would like to stop here and wish you all the very best. I think it is very important we reconnect ourselves with our textural base, and that is going to give us the way forward, and such pandemic are ways of life which we will be able to handle and go forward. Thank you.